Hello everyone, welcome to our first walkthrough video for CSC242. This is lecture 1 where we're going to be reviewing some concepts from 241 that are going to be very useful for this class. So to get started, just to kind of get familiar with the IDE that we'll be using, I have 3.9 downloaded. If you're using 3.10, they're pretty much the same, so not a huge difference there. To go ahead and get started with our coding, whenever you open up your shell, you're going to be brought into this area where you can actually type out code. So very similar to our other languages, if we use this print concept, we could say something like print hello, and then we'll get hello back as well. And very basically, if we create variables like a is equal to 15, I can do a print of a, or I can just type out a as well, and that will output more items for us too. Now, again, from 241, you did a bit more complex coding, and this is straightforward enough, but where we want to go is if you go up to File and hit New File, you'll be brought into this area that's called the scripting section. So a script is essentially where you'll be able to make functions and run them, and when you run your script in here, it will actually output it into shell. So to showcase that, if I say a is equal to 15, and then I say print a, and what I'll do next is I'm going to set a to hello world and print a again. When I run this script here, you'll see run module, or you can hit F5 on Windows or F5 on Mac. When you do it that way, you're going to have to save it first, but you can just go to your desktop. I'll call it test, and when I save this one, you'll see here that I get 15 and a hello world straight away. Now, if you are editing your assignments or you're doing a lab and you are saving it and you want to pick up to where you left off, what you could do is on your Py file, you're going to right click it and then go to edit with idle. When you click on that, it will bring up the scripting area again. I wanted to showcase a brief overview of how sets, lists, and tuples work inside of Python. So the way that we declare these are a little different each time. We actually use 3 different types of brackets. So I'm going to create a set A, like so. And the way that we create a set is by actually using these 2 curly brackets like here. Now, this is a bit similar to what you might consider as dictionaries inside of Python, but the issue is that whenever we're making a dictionary, we create a key value like so, and we create a key, and then we place a colon between them, and then we have a value associated with that key. So right now in my set A, this is actually technically a dictionary with a key of apple and a value of 5. To create a set though, what we're going to do is we're actually just going to create multiple objects with commas. And an interesting thing is that a set can actually have a few different data types. So if you're coming from Java or C, you'll notice that we can't usually do this with our data structures, but for this scenario here, we can. Now, what's another interesting thing about sets here is that you'll notice that when I created it this way, my true is actually at the start followed by 5. It looks like it's reverse. And if I run this one more time, you'll notice that I'm actually getting, it looks like the booleans and integers come all the time, but all these are actually different. So a set is unordered, so it's very hard for us to determine which one will come first. So sets are useful if you want to keep a track of a general a general amount of items. And why is it useful to do that? Well, if I create another variable like test a few more times, you'll notice here that my size of my set isn't increasing. So another thing is that you cannot have the same identical object inside of a set multiple times. Let's try to see if this is true for Boolean values, and it looks like it is. So if you have 2 trues, you're only going to get 1 in your set. So again, a set is unordered, and it's not able to be mutated. You can add and remove things from it, but you can't have multiple items in it. Cool. So for a list is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and say list A. I'll just call it my list for the time being. And the way we declare a list is actually by using these 2 little brackets that are there. Now, again, some of the functions a part of a list that you're going to be familiar with is probably the length of my list. So if I declare it right now, it's going to be a 0 as we expected. And how do I go ahead and actually access the indexes of a list? Well, you're going to actually use the same index brackets that you used before. So for this one, you're going to see it as 0. So, and you'll notice here that if I have a 0 in an empty list, it won't actually work for me because there's nothing inside of it. So if I keep going with this concept and I try to change 0 to a 1, this is the type of errors you might see quite a bit. So now I get my list index out of range because I don't have an index of 0 or 1 in my code. Cool. So how do I actually add items into my list? Well, why don't we actually grab up what we have from over here, and let's try to copy them down here very briefly. And if I run my code here, we'll notice that instead of having a set of size 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we actually have it a size 6. So my list is actually containing the extra true that's inside of there. And I can actually access each index of my list properly by increasing it from 0 to 2. So now I'm getting tests. And that's another thing that you'll notice here is that every time I run my code, my apple is always at index 0, my banana is always at index 1, and my test is always at index 2. And what this means for us is that a list is ordered. So a list does have an order, and it will always maintain that order for us. Now, why is that important? Well, what we could do now is try to create a for loop. So there's two different ways that we could do for looping. You can either loop by element, or you can loop by index. So what do we mean when we say loop by element? Well, let's just say that you have a list of items like I have right here, and I only want to print out those items. What I could say here is for item in my list, I'm going to print item. Now, you may be concerned, okay, well, do I need to put the word item here? No, very similar to other languages. This can literally be whatever it can be whatever you want it to be. It could be E for element. It could be I for item. But usually the canonical way of using it is that I is going to be referencing the index value. So if you're using a for I in my list, that's going to be your index. So to actually showcase this, you'll see here, and I'm actually going to comment out, you'll notice that I have these red hashtags there. And what this means is that they are a pound sign, excuse me. So what this means is that I'm commenting out what's going on here, and that won't run our code anymore. So I'm going to comment out a few more things, and you'll see here that when I do for E in my list and I print it, I get every element in my list. Now, how do I actually do this by index? So when we say by index, what we mean is that if I say for I in my list and I print I, you'll notice an issue occurs is that the I isn't referenced as index. What we need to do to actually access each index value is say for I in range of length of my list. So essentially the length of my list is going to return 6, and I'm going to go through the range of those items. And because we're starting at 0, what we're saying is here, go from 0 up to 5, because the range is actually going to end at 6, and it's exclusive of 6. So if the length of my list is 6, what this will do for me is go up to 0 and 5. Now what happens if I add a 10 into my list up here? So now I'm at 7. What will the range be from here? Well, what this will be is from 0 up until 6. So again, that's kind of how we can manipulate these two items here. And now you'll notice here that the I in this scenario isn't actually the element, it's actually the index. So how do I use this index to go, this scenario will be 6. How do I use my index to print out the items? Well, what I could say now in my for loop is say, okay, print out my list at index I. And you'll notice now that instead of getting the regular 0 to 6, I'm getting these ones here. Cool. So that's kind of the basics of the list. Element and index is the most important parts of that one. For tuples, a tuple is going to be declared as having this type of parentheses around them of 5 and 4, and usually a tuple is just going to be a combination of 2 or more. And you'll notice that when I print my A, it's going to give me back the items there. So what I'm going to do one more time is let me just print out, comment out the statements of print, and I'm going to use this keyword that you might have seen before called pass. And what that does in Python, because Python's very picky about like if I don't have pass in here and I run my code, you'll get the syntax error that says expected and indented block. So what you want to do is if you're testing your code, just write pass there. That will solve it for you. And what we could say next here is if I have 5 and 4, I can also print out the indexes of my tuple. Cool. Well, notice I now get 5 of 4. And let's try to see if these indexes are mutated. I'm going to be able to say set A of equal to 5. And you'll notice here that my tuple does actually not support item assignment. So what happens here if I try assigning a value, like if 1 is equal to 5, is that it won't work for me. And you'll notice a tuple, we usually have it as 1 or 2 of them. You could have more than it, but a tuple is going to stay ordered, but it's not going to be like a list where I can modify it. So a tuple is something that will be ordered but unmodifiable, immutable as they call it, and a list will be ordered and mutable, and a set will be unordered and immutable. So that's kind of the differences between these guys. And again, you can play around with this code in here. It's not too complicated, but this is just a good reminder of some of these data structures. And the last one that we can kind of briefly look at too is our dictionaries that we looked at a while ago. You won't need to worry about dictionaries too much in this course as compared to 242. But again, a dictionary is going to have this concept where we have set B. You'll see that it's a class of dictionary. And again, a dictionary, if I try accessing like the 0th index, you'll notice that I get a key error. So a key error is essentially telling us that the key doesn't exist. So if I try to say, okay, get the index of 5 of my dictionary, oh, looks like we can't see it. My camera's covering it. You'll notice here that I'm getting these key errors inside of my dictionary because our dictionaries don't operate the same way as these ones. I believe, yep. So if I do setb.keys, we're going to get the dictionary keys of 5. And essentially what we could say here is you can go through a dictionary and print out the keys and the values. Don't worry too much about the dictionaries as of now. It's just a good refresher on it. But if you're familiar with these 3 concepts up here, you should be in good shape for the first assignment.